Regulatory Foresight, Business Models and Trends Shaping Malta's iGaming Industry.
Welcome to the regulatory talk show, because that's how it is today, it seems. Next time, please, I want a mug. Thank you. So, welcome to all the panelists. Business model changes and regulatory changes, they always interact. Some of the latest trends that I see would be splitting further of the regulatory supplies, using of new technology like artificial intelligence in the businesses. And from the regulatory side, we see more and more countries introduce local place of consumption regulation. But at the same time, there are quite a few new place of supply jurisdictions popping up here and there. So how all this affects Malta and Malta gaming industry? Let's start from composition of the industry, the sheer numbers, B2B, B2C main building blocks of this industry. Is it true that today the Malta gaming industry predominantly consists of B2B? Charles, you're the best here to have the figures. Please share them with us.
Yes, obviously I share your views, and the data shows that trend. When I joined the MGA in 2024, the composition of the gaming license applications was more or less split equally between B2B and B2Cs. Today we are seeing this shift. This shift is materializing. Today we have around 54% of the license applications which are B2B, of a B2B nature, the rest are B2C. And also what's interesting is also the fact that the new applications coming in more or less share that same percentage between them. So the trend is in actual fact materializing.
Right, so B2B is the trend. Enrico, you work with many licensees in the industry. How does it affect the landscape in the sense of efficiencies of the regulators? Is there something, in your view, regulators can do to improve efficiencies in licensing and introducing these new participants in the markets? Can you please increase the volume? I can't hear my panelists. Thank you.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. So, yes, the majority of the licenses are B2B in Malta, as we heard. And it becomes even more important to have an efficient licensing process, a predictable licensing process, and an easy-to-use licensing tools, processes, in order to match the speed of the business. And I would say that the MGA and here in Malta, we've made progress over the years with the portal, but it's a competitive environment as well from a regulatory perspective. So I urge Charles and the MGA to keep ahead of the curve and really look at the internal efficiencies of their processes to enable business.
Thank you, Enrico. Charles, the question is to you, actually. Is there anything MGA looking at or planning to implement to actually improve efficiencies of the processes?
Yes, in actual fact, there is a lot of things that are happening in the background at the MGA. I think we already made some improvements. Coincidentally, last week I was looking at some figures. For example, the average processing time applications. And when I say applications, I mean good quality applications, because this is something that we need to stress on. So it's very important that the applications are of a good quality, otherwise the process will take even longer. But as I was referring, we've seen a significant reduction in the processing time. I would say it's reduced by half than it was before. Obviously, we believe that we can do much more. And in fact, the team is currently working on a project in order to improve efficiency. Obviously, we'll be looking at B2B and the B2C side. We believe there is obviously a difference between them, so we'll be adopting a risk-based approach. And as I said, sort of work is, a lot of work is going on behind the scenes at the moment, so hopefully we will be able to share this information soon.
Great. It would be very nice at some point to know that the maximum processing time is X, whatever this X is, but for predictability. Let's move to a different trend, examine different trend. Malta has kept its quite high regulatory standards for quite a while. But lately, quite recently, we've seen that when a jurisdiction, another jurisdiction in this case, changes its standards, raises its standards to a much higher level, all of a sudden we see a lot of movements in the industry, and some regulators jump the ship and go to another jurisdictions very quickly. Michaela, how does this trend affect Malta gaming industry, regulated industry?
Thanks, Olga, and good morning, everyone. I think the industry has changed a lot in the past 10 years and possibly even the past 5 years, in the sense that now there's a larger dichotomy between operators operating in white markets, so purely regulated markets, point of consumption-based regimes, and completely unregulated frameworks, right? So those are the two extremes that operators are currently facing. With the advent of things like crypto casinos and so on, these extremes have grown further apart. Countries like Malta and other offshore licensing hubs like the Isle of Man, Gibraltar, Curacao and so on kind of stand in the middle. But the reality is nowadays you have larger and a much more growing number of operators that actually don't even subscribe to any license, any offshore license. And that has created somewhat of a change in framework that does impact the MGA. Because the moment you speak to an operator, an up-and-coming operator, his question will be, why should I, subscribe to the requirements of an offshore jurisdiction, if we want to call it that, when, without any licensing whatsoever, I can still do the same things. I'll be way more profitable, and there's a higher likelihood that my business will turn out well. And that's a very big challenge. 5 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago, you needed a reputable hub because you needed banks, you needed B2B providers. Nowadays, you don't need banks. There's plenty of other ways to conduct your payments. B2Bs have become experts at regulatory arbitrage. So we have a very different environment, and I think offshore hubs need to recognize that's it's a different playing field, and there are some things that I think can be done to achieve this. I mean, also the whitelisted markets are seeing the same situation where there's a growing lack of channelization towards regulated markets. So it's a challenge, and I think the MGA still has a very important role to play. The strength of the MGA is its reputation, but I think there is a scenario where certain elements of the framework maybe we need to rethink to remain competitive. And let's face it, this is Malta's strength. It has always been Malta's strength to be nimble and to evolve with the industry.
Right. Well, if I read between the lines what Michaela is saying, basically he's saying we are over-regulating, if I understood him correctly. What is your view? Are we over-regulating?
I don't totally agree with what Michaela is saying, in the sense that obviously we are the regulator, we need to do our job. However, at the back of our mind, we always keep the word balance in our thoughts. We always try to strike the right balance between regulation and obviously keeping the market growing. It's not easy. It's not easy to find that right balance. Sometimes we manage, sometimes we don't. But if we don't regulate, obviously, I think we'll do much more harm than good, because obviously we all know that unregulated markets lead to black markets, and that also means that the players are in danger, because obviously part of our job and part of the regulations we have put in place is there to protect the player. That is also one of the most important pillars for us. Obviously, we would have always stressed that we would like to see some kind of harmonization, but I don't think there is really that appetite across other jurisdictions to start that discussions. So, frankly, I think that the MGA, and as Michaela pointed out as well, has been doing a good job for a long number of years now. We are considered sort of a gold standard when it comes to regulations, and I think we are on the right path to continue doing that.
Right, so I guess we all agree it has to be regulated, but the devil in the detail and the level of regulation, we need to find the sweet spot for that. Enrico, in finding of this sweet spot for the regulation from the MGA side, how do you think MGA should act on the market if and when it discovers there are unregulated operators around in the country?
Yes, and just to pick up on the point that Michele made, that we discussed about overregulation, from a business owner perspective, from a licensed company perspective, there are so many licenses that the companies need to have in the various territories in order to operate in those territories. So there is definitely an overregulation from that perspective. Even if we just look at Europe, there isn't one common regulation. The second point is that the double whammy that the regulated companies are suffering is that the regulators tend to focus on the regulated companies, whilst, as we said, there is a whole unregulated industry that is more profitable, that is more aggressive, that is not as in favor of player protection, for example, that is causing real harm to the population. But that, and this is not only in Malta, is a generic, but also in Malta, I feel that whether it's the duty of the regulator or the duty of the enforcement or the police, the investigation, that part is not really being tackled in a satisfactory way from the operator, the regulated business's perspective. So this is the one ask I would put forward, is a stronger enforcement, and here in Malta, so applies to Malta as well, but not only to Malta. But it is to have a stronger enforcement of the non-regulated business, of these companies that operate in our industry, but they do not play by the same rules as the industry that by and large is represented here.
Thank you. If we zoom into the sweet spot and regulation, is there anything, Michaela, in your view, which rather easily done or more straightforwardly done by the regulator to make the life of operators here easier, to reduce the overload, sometimes unnecessary overload?
I think Malta has always, at least over the past, let's say, 10, 15 years, definitely Malta has always been focusing on getting, very reputable, serious companies to be based here. However, nowadays, obviously, these companies are subject to 15, 20 different licenses and different regulations. Malta's strength has always been pushed by the Maltese policymaker as the jurisdiction of primary establishment. And I think there is a part of regulation that goes into that. We always talk about non-duplication of requirements. We always talk about a level of standardization across at least Europe, And I think that's where there's an opportunity for Malta. The truth is, I think what's going to happen probably in the next 2 years, we're going to see the first few companies in Malta using the Maltese license only for the Maltese market. I think Malta at that point needs to be ready that the Maltese license shouldn't be a burden as much on operators who are operating only in white markets. For example, there's things like minimum tax and basic capital requirements, not capital requirements, basic standards that make it difficult to justify from a market access perspective, because then you're still looking at a market of 500,000 people. So the license in the near future is going to be for, at least for a number of serious companies, is going to be only for the Maltese market. At that point, the MGA license needs to be convincing enough and needs to be, the process needs to be smooth enough that it's the companies won't say, this is too much of a problem to maintain. So we need to look at, how can we tie the Maltese requirements to be as similar as and non-conflicting with other European requirements. And there are quite a few examples that if you look at, Maltese legislation, you can remove a few pain points. If I had to think a couple off the top of my head, let's look at approval of directors. In Malta, before you change a director, it needs a prior approval from the MGA. That sometimes is a matter of a few months. If you look at the UK, which is also a gold standard of regulation, they allow you to change the director, the due diligence is done, and then you get an approval or a rejection at that point. But at the MGA, you're stuck until you can actually make that change. Another example is in verification. For example, in most European countries, verification is done at onboarding stage. In Malta, I wouldn't say it's encouraged, but the standard is that it's done at a 2K deposit threshold. However, then you have a mandatory requirement that as soon as you hit the 2K threshold, you need to perform another PEP check. That is something that it doesn't exist elsewhere. So it creates a situation where you need to have two systems, one system for continental Europe, one system for the MGA. That is, I think, where there is an opportunity for the MGA to make it less painful to keep an MGA license after, these next couple of years where it's going to be challenging to say why you still need a B2C license for market access.
Great. Carl, for a large group like Leo Vegas, obviously when you choose a place as your place of primary establishment, surely you look at a wider picture, not just the gaming regulator, but the wider approach. What are the factors that tips the scale towards staying here?
I think I don't disagree with anything that was said so far. But at the same time, and I'm going to give Charles a little bit of a break here, there's more, both in terms of the regulatory framework and in terms of other establishment factors that Malta needs to look at. Specifically, we don't just deal with the MGA. We deal with the FIU, we deal with the MBR, probably we'll need to deal with the MDIA for AI purposes, so we deal with the IDPC. So there's so many regulators that we deal with, even in country, parking the fact that we have tens of licenses. So that is something that Malta can look at. Similarly, we are here, this is our largest hub, and we fully intend to stay here. But obviously then the other factors that encourage establishment in Malta need to stay there and to be improved. So you're looking at corporate tax, for example. We know that for big companies like ours, that incentive is going to be at the very least, minimized. You look at finding people. We are, to an extent, victims of our own success. So finding people in Malta and retaining people in Malta is expensive. And what that means is that things like, for example, HQP need to be looked at, need to be ideally broadened. So those are factors which I think Malta has been traditionally excellent at. So looking at what businesses like gaming, and not just gaming, but what businesses really need in order to thrive outside of the regulatory framework, and making sure that those factors are still present and still very good.
Any other factors which are important for the industry in your view? Enrico, Michaela?
So I still think that Malta is a fantastic hub. Yes, there are the challenges of recruiting, the challenges of retaining staff, the challenges of a cost of living that keeps on increasing, but the critical mass is here. So for me, there is a bright future when it comes to Malta as a jurisdiction.
I agree. I think Malta has all the right elements. And as I said before, kind of Malta needs to play to its strengths, and its strengths have always been the adaptability of both regulators, policymakers, and so on to the challenges in the sector. And that's how Malta will survive, how Malta will thrive.
I would like to pick up on one point that Carl mentioned about MDAA and AI. Of course, MGA, as we know, cooperates with other authorities. We know that if there is a FIU audit, there is a joint supervision there. So this is nothing new. But to my mind, the fact that the MDAA regulates now application of AI under the EU AI Act is different, actually, because AI in this context is just a tool that directly affects gaming regulatory outcomes. So in this context, how do you envisage this cooperation or supervision happen, actually?
In reality, this cooperation is already happening. So we're already in discussions with MDIA to see how we can capitalize on this new tool, this fantastic tool, both internally and also when it comes to regulation and regulating operators. So at the moment we have, our teams are looking into this. We are seeing, for example, if we look at AI from an internal perspective, we believe that this could improve our efficiencies. It helps us on the day-to-day work. But when it comes to sort of from the side of the operators, we also believe that AI is an essential tool. It could help also to monitor trends, to identify and preempt issues, particularly when it comes, for example, to player protection. It could possibly identify people who actually are over gambling. So yes, this is obviously one aspect that now has become one of our central focuses. So AI is the future. So we need to be attentive to it, and we need also to make the most of it. And this has, as the MJ has always done, when we see new opportunities, we capitalize on them in order to be one of the first to introduce and make the most of these tools.
That's great to hear. I hope this path will continue, and maybe MGA can start by accepting AI translated documents, because I heard there is a problem with that. The time is running out. Last comments by the panelists, and if I may ask you to rate from 1, the gloomiest, to 5, the brightest, how you see the future of this industry in Malta in the next 12 months. Michaela.
Being the first one, I'm put a bit on the spot, but I think it's still bright. I think Malta's still the place to be if you're in iGaming, pretty much. There are challenges as always. So if I had to put a number to it, I would say midway, a 3, in the sense that right now we're a constant. Right?
It's a very safe answer. Very safe answer.
I actually want, as a last comment though, I want to touch slightly on the concept of B2B licensing. And I understand the point where we put more of a focus on the B2B licensing, but at the same time the B2B licensing framework is very much tied with the B2C licensing framework. So we need to strengthen the B2C licensing framework in order to strengthen the B2B licensing framework, because if I'm a B2B operator and I'm operating in Italy, I don't need a Malta B2B. So we need to make sure that there's a strong reason why to retain the Malta B2B, and to do that we need a strong B2C license.
Enrico?
I would state a 4 in that scale. I think the future in Malta is bright. I see from a human capital perspective, there is going to be an increase in the higher end. I think the entry-level positions, it's becoming difficult in terms of salaries and cost of living to make that equation work. So I see an upskilling of the workforce in Malta. But Malta has the critical mass of competencies. So I think the future is certainly bright.
Carl?
I'll stick to a 4. I think we need the courage to take a couple of decisions, but other than that, I think very bright future.
Charles,
Very
you have
difficult
the
question.
last word.
No, I see sort of coming from the industry, obviously being involved heavily, I firmly believe that the future is bright. There are some interesting projects coming up. Hopefully, a lot of things that we have been working for a long time materialize soon, and that will help, I think, to have a bright future, as my colleague said.
Thank you. Our time is up. I would like to thank the panelists for an insightful discussion. Talk show is over. Thank you.
Olga, what a brilliant, brilliant way to start.